Noctambula, written and produced by Oliver Arnold. Chapter 3. Emily sighed as she refilled Bodhi's water bowl. Can't believe I just woke up. She ran a hand through her tangled hair, wincing as her fingers caught in the knots, and went over to the grandfather clock. 11 a.m. I don't think I've ever slept so deeply. Must be the fresh air. Again, this fresh air thing. Her limbs felt leaden, her body stiff, not refreshed, with a movement sluggish like she was waiting for molasses. She couldn't think of a better analogy. What exactly was molasses anyway? Despite 14 hours of sleep, exhaustion clung to her like a second skin. She squinted at the sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, the brightness making her head throb. Still groggy, she headed to make herself a much-needed coffee, the routine movements providing a small comfort in this strange new rural life. Countryside living isn't just a lifestyle, it's a spiritual journey, she'd proclaimed with conviction, envisioning blog-worthy moments around every corner. The coffee machine gurgled and hissed, filling the kitchen with its rich aroma. Emily breathed it in, hoping the familiar scent would clear the fog from her mind. Cup in hand, she trudged to the little table where she distinctly remembered leaving her phone last night. But when she reached for it, her fingers met empty space. The phone was gone. She set down her mug, with more force than intended, coffee sloshing over the rim and onto the weathered tabletop. I swear I put it right here, she muttered, wiping the spill with her sleeve. Emily looked around the kitchen, methodically scanning the granite countertops, rifling through her canvas bag hanging by the door, even peering into the sink in case she had placed it somewhere absent-mindedly while preparing dinner last night. When that produced nothing, irritation crept up within her. She moved on to the living room, the floorboards creaking beneath her bare feet. The morning light cast long shadows across the furniture, lending the room an eerie quality she hadn't noticed before. Emily crouched to peer under the sofa and slipped her hand between the worn cushions. She found crumbs, a penny, a forgotten hair tie, and a spider that scuttled away from her probing fingers. Of no phone. Come on, she groaned, pushing herself to her feet. There has to be somewhere. Frustration mounting, she dragged a wooden stool across the floor and stood on it, stretching to glance over the tops of taller shelves and cabinets. She was determined to leave no corner unchecked in this unfamiliar house that still didn't quite feel like home. That's when something odd caught her eye. A small hole in the wall behind a piece of furniture, partially hidden and surrounded by a cluster of cables. The wallpaper around it was discolored, as if someone had patched it hastily. At first glance, it seemed like part of an old speaker setup, maybe remnants from the previous owner's renovation. She brushed it off with a shrug, deciding it wasn't mission critical. With a defeated sigh, she collapsed onto the floral couch, the overly puffy cushions enveloping her tired body, her fingers tightly gripping the now lukewarm coffee mug. Her eyes roamed the room in restless thought, taking in the faint mustiness that seemed to permeate everything despite her best cleaning efforts. How could it just vanish? The isolation of her new home suddenly felt oppressive rather than liberating. Without her phone, she was completely cut off. No calls, no texts, no social media. No way to contact Patrick if something went wrong. With a flash of suspicion, she glanced at Bodhi, who watched her from his cage with beady, intelligent eyes. "Did you take it?" she teased, eyeing him playfully, desperate to break the tension she felt building up inside herself. "Or maybe we've got some mischievous mice around here." Bodhi tilted his head, regarding her with what almost looked like amusement, before letting out a sharp squawk that echoed through the quiet house. "Bodhi, sometimes I think you don't understand me at all," Emily said, glancing at her feathered companion, who was busy attacking a wooden toy bead in his cage and paid her no heed. Maybe they could run a phone line from town? Emily had read somewhere that they buried cables in the ocean between continents. Why not between forests? After her viral documentary made her famous, after she had millions in the bank, she'd just have one custom laid. That could be another show, in fact. Emily F. brings broadband to backwater. She smiled at the thought, momentarily forgetting her missing phone. Rising from the couch, Emily moved to the window, gazing out at the overgrown yard that stretched toward the woods beyond. She frowned, noticing a few uneven patches in the soil. The ground seemed to undulate subtly, as if breathing. Could it be a sinkhole? Did such geological phenomena exist in this region, or were they confined to wet coastal areas? Emily realized that she knew nothing about sinkholes and where and why they appeared. She would have to research foundations, their types, and how they worked. Yet another thing. The coffee was cold now, but Emily drank it anyway, grimacing at the bitter taste. She set the empty mug down with determination. Without her phone, without the constant digital tether to her old life, she felt adrift, irritable. But wasn't that what she wanted? To disconnect, to experience life unfiltered through a screen? Fine, she announced to the empty room. I'll live authentically today. Emily set out to clear her mind by exploring the woods surrounding her new home. She ransacked her closet, pulling out gear she'd bought for this very purpose. She was dressed for adventure, a character in her own narrative. Sturdy hiking boots with red laces, cargo pants with more pockets than she knew what to do with, a tactical backpack filled with water balls and granola bars from the gas station, and a wide-rimmed hat that she adjusted in the mirror, trying to strike the perfect balance between practical and photogenic. When she stepped outside, the sky was a flat, dismal gray, casting a heavy shadow over everything. Not the golden, dappled light she'd envisioned for her documentary footage, but hey, she didn't have her phone to film anyways. Emily found herself drawn to the eerie, somber ambiance. There was something compelling about it, something that felt more authentic than the cheerful, curated nature. She scanned her surroundings, noticing how the tall, wiry trees seemed to loom over her like silent sentries, their branches sparse and gnarled, reaching toward the cloudless sky like starved arms in search of help. The ground was thickly blanketed in damp leaves, filling the air with the rich scent of wet earth and decay. Each step produced a soft squelch, the sound oddly satisfying in the stillness. Emily noticed that many of the trees were shedding out of season. Russet and amber leaves drifted down around her, though it was only early summer. Others stood dead and skeletal, blackened and brittle as if struck by lightning or disease. Scattered stumps dotted the forest floor, their rings telling stories of lives cut short. Emily didn't know what to make of this, if anything, but couldn't help but narrate in her head, crafting the voiceover she would add later. Day 15 in the wilderness, and I've abandoned technology to connect with nature at its most raw and unfiltered. The thought made her smile, despite the unsettled feeling in her stomach. She stopped and took in the setting. This is not what I expected, Emily whispered, her voice sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. The forest was supposed to be vibrant, teeming with life. Instead, it felt sick, dying, as if something had poisoned it from within. Curious, she stepped up to one of the old trees and pressed her fingers into the bark. It crumbled at her touch like wet cardboard. Gross, she muttered, but then leaned in for a closer look despite herself. Just then, a creak echoed in the silence, making her pause and look around. The sound was sharp, out of place in the quiet forest. Emily turned, scanning the trees, but didn't see any obvious source. Wind through branches? An animal moving through the underbrush? The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and she suddenly felt watched, though she could see nothing but trees and mist. Then, without warning, a loud crack and tearing noise erupted from behind her, like thick fabric ripping on a massive scale. Emily whipped around just in time to see an enormous oak toppling toward her, its roots tearing free of the soft earth. The huge trunk was hurtling straight at her with shocking speed, its shadow growing across her face. Instinct took over. She leapt aside, her boots slipping on the damp leaves. The trunk crashed down inches away from where she stood moments before, splintering on impact. Rotted wood exploded in all directions, showering her with debris and a cloud of dust that made her cough and gag. Heart hammering in her chest, Emily simply stood and stared. After the dust settled, she caught her breath, her pulse racing in her ears, and leaned over to inspect the shattered remains. The brittle wood crumbled between her fingers like ash. The tree hadn't been felled by wind or lightning. It somehow died, perhaps by disease, weakened until it could no longer stand. Is it time to go home? Was this a bold and obvious sign from the forest to have her leave? Emily thought, a chill running down her spine despite the warmth of the day. For a moment, she considered turning back, returning to the supposed safety of the house with its mysterious holes and vanishing phones. Her fingers itched for her missing device, longing to document this decay. But after only a minute, reason returned. Shaking off the shock, Emily continued her exploration, moving cautiously around the rotting stumps and hollowed-out logs. The forest grew denser as she walked, the trees pressing closer together, branches interlacing overhead to block out what little light filtered through the clouds. She walked on, closely tracking her path, as she was well aware that without a map on her phone, she could get lost easily. After another 10 minutes, Emily entered a swampier area than what surrounded her house. The air felt thicker here, harder to breathe, heavy with moisture and the sweet-sour smell of decomposition. But just as she thought she was safely on her way, navigating the treacherous ground with growing confidence, her foot twisted painfully into a hidden hole, her ankle wrenching with a sharp stab of pain. She cried out. Emily tried to shift her weight to the other leg, only to feel herself sinking deeper, the earth giving way beneath her. Her other leg, too, slipped into the soft, crumbling ground, trapping her up to her knee in the cold, wet soil. "Oh, crap," she muttered, her heart pounding as she struggled to free herself, pulling desperately at her trapped limbs. Every movement caused her to sink further into the decaying forest floor until she was buried up to her hips, the earth seeming to actively draw her down rather than simply yield into gravity. Panic surged through her like ice water as she clawed at the loose dirt, trying to pull herself out. The more she struggled, the faster she sank, the ground sucking greedily at her body. Her voice cracked with fear, echoing uselessly against the silent trees. Oh, how she wished that weirdo meat guy were nearby right now. She paused to catch her breath, forcing herself to think past the rising terror. Panicking would only make her sink faster. She had learned that on TV. She needed to distribute her weight and find something solid to hold on to. As she surveyed the ground, her eyes caught on a pale object protruding from the soil beside her, yellowed and smooth, curving gently up from the earth. A bone. All artificial calm left Emily instantly. She freaked. Agitated beyond reason, she dug frantically at the ground with her hands, clawing her way upward inch by painful inch, mud-coating her arms to the elbows. She finally managed to hook her fingers around a nearby root. With one final, Herculean effort, she wrenched herself free from the sucking earth, the ground releasing her with a wet, reluctant smacking. She scrambled to her feet, legs coated in black mud, and staggering backward. Then she broke into a run, not daring to look back. Branches ripped at her face, roots threatened to trip her, but fear drove her forward, her breath coming in ragged gasps, heartbeat thundering in her ears. After what felt like an eternity, Emily finally slowed, lungs burning and legs quivering with exhaustion. She found a tree, the sturdiest she could see, and leaned against it, sliding down to sit at its base, her breath shallow and ragged. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving her cold and shaking, her pulse gradually steadying as her mind tried to process what just happened. "What's wrong with this place?" she whispered, looking around at the dying forest. The trees appeared to draw nearer, their silent presence felt almost menacing. The image of the bone flashed vividly in her mind, intensifying the growing sense of dread. Gradually, her eyes grew heavy, despite her fear, exhaustion overwhelming her. The forest around her blurred and softened, colors bleeding together in a greenish-gray haze. Without realizing it, Emily drifted off, her head lolling against the rough bark. When Emily woke some time later, the day hadn't advanced much. She dropped awake, half expecting some terrible thing kneeling right next to her, ready to devour her, or perhaps that meat guy just lowering his pants. Instead, all was peaceful around her, and great doubt and shame overcame Emily. She analyzed the events. Some old rotting trees, some mud holes. That was really all she had experienced. Suddenly, She felt good about being alone, unobserved. No one had witnessed her embarrassing behavior. "Witless city girl scared by tree" would be the headline in the local newspaper had rescuers retrieved her. She was weeping like death was upon her when I found her stuck in some mud. I grabbed a stick and pulled her out. Got a little dirty. The interviewed meat guy, what was his name, would tell the newspaper. Patrick would have a good chuckle. Emily made a decision. She would never share these events with anyone. You've heard the third chapter of Noctambula, written and produced by Oliver Arnold.